This meeting is being recorded.
So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me warmly welcome you for another evening webinar organized by the CPD Committee of CMA Sri Lanka. The purpose of today's webinar is to educate the members as well as those who are present here about the impact of pricing on the society and also discuss various factors that we have to consider when pricing products for both local and export markets. So to talk about the impact of pricing, we have a galaxy of speakers who will present their views during the panel discussion. But first and foremost, let me invite very respectfully the President of CMA Sri Lanka, Founder President, Professor Lakshman R. Vattawala, to deliver the welcome address. As we know, Professor Vattawala is also the Founder President of AAT Sri Lanka, a past President of CA Sri Lanka, a past President of the South Asian Corporation of Accountants. He is currently serving as the Chairman of the International Relations Committee of the South Asian Federation of Accountants. Professor Vattawala, we would like to learn from you the start of the Cost and Management Accounting Standards Board and also your views about the impact of pricing on society and also the factors that we need to consider. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you very much, Ruchira. Today, let me welcome all of you to this CMA CPD webinar on costing and pricing of products and services for local and export markets and the impact on pricing and society. This is really based on the current situation in the country where costing and pricing are very important. And maybe I think if everyone will mute themselves. Right. Okay, fine. Thank you. So taking the current situation in at the moment, one of the most important things is costing and pricing of the products and services. So we have a very eminent panel of speakers and also a panel who will be taking part in the panel discussion. So we have with us Mr. Mahendra Jayasekara, who is the chairman of the Cost and Management Accounting Standard Board. We have Mr. Raman, who is a member of our advisory council. Then we have Mr. Hennayaka Bandara, who is the president of SAFA and also vice president of CMA. Then Mr. Ruchira Pereira, who is the moderator. He is the member of the council of CMA. Then we have Mr. Jagat Piris, a very experienced businessman with experience in the export sector. Ms. Jeevani Aberatna, who is the finance director of APCAB Limited, is coming under the Haley's Group. Asanka Rajapaksa, who is the managing director of OTR wheel manufacturers. Ms. Ramya Veerakun, I think she is also one of the big exporters, especially in the garment area, and a past chairman of the National Exporters Association. And Mr. Vasanta from the Sam City Cement Corporation. So, and also let me welcome all our participants. So as I said earlier, we are really wanting to speak about this costing, pricing, and of course the impact on the society. Now, this has really resulted as a result of the current economic situation that we have faced in this very critical situation. And as you know, the cost, if you look at some of the major problems that are faced, is due to, of course, the cost area. Today, no one has taken very much of notice of the cost area. Then, of course, the other one is the financial area. And if you look at the major problems that we are having, because it's really maybe something that we as professional accountants would not have expected, where we are unable to repay our debts. As a result, we are having a major problem. Then on the other hand, where the foreign exchange is not available, and as a result, we are having severe shortages in the key areas which will help the industrial development, like the fuel, the gas, and various other items, getting down the raw materials, opening of letters of credit. All these are of great concern. So one of the what we find is as a result of this, we have to have better systems and procedures in place. If you look at our economy, it was in 2010 that we came into a new status of like a newly developed country, but that really put us into great difficulty because at that stage we should have been ready to go into this new change that took place. So that is why even at this late stage, we feel that the costing and management accounting have to come into place. And if that is in place, the society will also benefit. Because ultimately, all these have to be met by the society and, of course, your customers. And as far as the exports are concerned, there is a benefit. They are getting more foreign exchange, but their raw materials, getting the supplies. So all these are also problems. So there may be not a net benefit, but they should be able to maintain. Now, the purpose of the cost and management accounting is to not only to cut down costs, but to ensure that there is efficiency and productivity. Now, these are two things that we have not been really talking of, because if you look at some of the major loss-making public sector institutions, we will find that the efficiency and productivity have not been spoken of. If you look at the government ministries that are taking all our funds, this is not being spoken of. So we need to look at these areas if we are going to succeed. Because at the moment, although we are getting maybe further loans to develop the country, if our systems and procedures are not right, if we are unable to improve our productivity and efficiency, we will be in serious trouble, because what will happen is our cost of production will go up. So therefore, we now have to go into a new area, and I think that immediately we may have to look at the new industrial area that we are talking of, Industry 4.0, where we have to use the digitization, the technology, the connectivity with various areas, which will help us to improve our productivity, our production capacities, because as you know, with these efficiencies, we will be able to produce maybe larger number of units. We will be able to give them at a cheaper price. So that would be one area that, as far as costing is concerned, that using these various methods that are available in cost accounting, that we can do it. Even for the government ministries, where they can use the activity-based costing to find out where the costs are going. There are certain government ministries that are also fully digitized and earning money for the money in their institutions. One is, of course, the department which is issuing the passports. Now they have a massive income because they are able to charge it. So similarly, other institutions will have to be digitized, and also they will have to see whether they can earn an income, because at the moment only they are spenders, but then if they are spending the money, they need to have tight control. So all these areas would be covered by our learned speakers, and in the panel discussion, we will be able to look at it. Now, one of the areas, the Ceylon Electricity Board, if you look at it, you will find that the cost that they are producing the power is much more than their selling price. This can be different reasons. One thing, of course, is that the high cost of production, because I remember in the late 70s and the 80s, the corporation that had the highest number of deposits was the Ceylon Electricity Board. At that time, their raw material was water. So they did not pay anything. But thereafter, when they went into the fuel, then only the problem started, because they didn't go into this costing area. If they had done a proper costing, if they had looked at the efficiency of the machinery and all this, then the coal power plants, now that is one of the cheapest modes of producing the power. So that would be accepted. Of course, they have the problem of the pollution that is coming, but at least if they did this very much earlier and they had done it, then we will not have the problems that we are having. So there has to be good management combined with the costing and management accounting, and of course the financial planning that has to go in if we are going to benefit. So we need very efficient services, we need efficient production, new technology, and digitization is one way that we can go ahead. Even I can tell you that from the CMA, as a result of digitization, we were able to overcome the problems that we had as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, because we could not have classroom lectures, we could not have examinations in classroom, but then by converting to the digitalization, we were able to carry on these activities. So these were done as a result that we were maybe not tied down by government institutions. We are a non-profit making institution, and we were able to carry this out with the staff and the others. We didn't get any new people, the existing people were trained. So similarly, all government departments may have to take this lead if we are really to make use of the costing and also to give benefit to the society. So these are a few things that I thought that I will place with you, because I'm sure the others would be able to speak in more detail of the importance of costing, because we have set up the cost and management accounting standards board. As I mentioned, Mr. Mahendra Jayasekara is the chairman of that, and Mr. Raman is a consultant and helping us in this respect. So we are very happy that we have been able to put out the framework for the managerial and societal costing, and a lot of the things that we are discussing would also be based on that one. So we hope that this webinar will help you to get an understanding into this. We know that the private sector is implementing all these things, but we need to see how the others, the government sector and the corporation sector, would be able to make this. So once again, let me thank everyone, and let me hand you over to our moderator.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you very much for your welcome address. Now let me move into, as Professor has mentioned, to the chairman of the Cost and Management Accounting Standards Board, Mr. Mahendra Jayasekara. Mr. Mahendra Jayasekara is a chartered accountant by profession. He is the managing director of Lanka Wall Tiles, and also he is the director of Lanka Tiles, Lanka Ceramic PLC, Systec and Systec Aluminium Limited. He has an honors degree in business administration from the University of Sri Jawaharlal, and he is a fellow member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka and also of CMA Sri Lanka. He holds a postgraduate diploma in Buddhist Studies from the Postgraduate Institute of Pali and Buddhist Studies, University of Kelaniya, Sri Lanka. Mr. Mahendra, we would like to hear from you the beginning, the start of the Cost and Management Accounting Standards Board and its development until now. Over to you, Mr. Mahendra. Mr. Mahendra, you are muted.
Thank you, Ruchira, for your introductory remarks. Good afternoon to all of you. Professor Lakshan Vatavala, the president and also the founder president of CMA Sri Lanka, Mr. Henanayaka Bandara, President Safa and Vice President CMA Sri Lanka, our distinguished speakers today, and also distinguished panelists and dear participants. At the outset, I would like to thank CMA Sri Lanka for inviting me to speak at this seminar, and my topic is going to be managerial and societal costing creating positive changes. As Ruchira mentioned and requested, I will also speak a little about the managerial, societal and managerial costing standard board. Cost and Managerial Standard Board set up by CMA Sri Lanka, of which I have had the honor of being the founder and also the present chairman. We started this exercise to come up with cost and managerial accounting standards back in 2018. Since 2018, we have been working on it. We have been having difficult times, but finally, last January, we were able to release the first exposure draft on the managerial cost and societal and managerial costing framework. So through the framework, what we are trying to do is to establish some kind of a framework within which we will be able to introduce cost and managerial accounting standards to the country, because this exercise has become a very pivotal exercise in the current context. Because to be honest with you, when I was appointed the chairman, when Professor Vattavala invited me to be the chairman of this board, I myself was not really sure what we were setting out to do. But over time, the picture became clear to me, and it became also clear to me how important what we were trying to do. And today, in the current context, it has become even more important when the inflation is rising, when people are complaining of goods and cost of goods and services. The need to maintain cost records, ascertain proper cost, and disclose proper costing, and consider how important costing is in pricing our products. So all these things, when we look at, it becomes very clear that we need to have costing standards in place, as Professor mentioned, both for private sector enterprises as well as for public sector enterprises. So actually, with rather than speaking, at length on that subject, I would like to shift to the topic I am supposed to speak on, which is managerial and societal costing creating positive changes. In fact, what I want to stress is, today we are speaking at a time when the Sri Lankan economy and also the country are plagued by many challenges. Now, today the country is going through political, economic, and social challenges, and the environment has become so challenging that we find it difficult to predict what is going to happen tomorrow. Now, what has happened is, as Professor also mentioned, actually Sri Lanka has been plagued by years of corruption and economic mismanagement. Nobody can deny that. We have been plagued by corruption and mismanagement for decades, and the result of corruption and mismanagement that have plagued this country for so long is manifesting itself in public protest now, challenging the very existence of not only the government but also the state. That is what we need to understand. And this has resulted in lack of foreign exchange in the country, very high inflation, and also a massive debt burden we have to bear. So as a country, we have political challenges, economic challenges, social challenges, and all these challenges are manifesting in public protest today, challenging the government and the state. And what is resulting in is very high inflation, severe lack of foreign exchange, and heavy debt. So due to the above reasons, when we look at costing and pricing of products, both costing and pricing of products for both local and export markets have become very challenging, because as I said earlier, we find it difficult to predict what is going to happen tomorrow. Actually, most of the companies are facing a situation that they are compelled to take price increases or look at cost and take price increases almost, at least, I am not exaggerating when I say weekly basis. I mean, in our own companies, sometimes in the past few weeks, we have taken price increases on weekly basis, really. So that is how the economy is moving forward, and that is how the situation is unfolding. So when we price our product for both local and export markets, we have to invariably look at or consider the price elasticity of demand, because I know most of the companies, most of local industries have been compelled to increase their prices by as much as 50, 60%, 70%, 80% in the last 2-3 months. In the companies I manage, certain companies have increased prices by 80%, as much as 80% in the last 3-4 months. And some companies as much as 60 to 70% in the last 2-3 months. So when we increase prices like that, the companies will have to invariably consider how price elastic the demand would be. Because at some point, we will see that the demand is not there at that price point to absorb the entire production. At which point, the companies will see inventories building up, factories running inefficiently, and working capital cycles getting tighter and tighter, increasing your finance costs, which will lead to bankruptcy of a lot of companies. So we need to handle this situation in a very careful and a methodical way. So bottom line is, when we are not in a position to increase prices to reflect the cost increase or fully recover the increase in cost, we will be compelled to look at market pricing to sell our entire production, both in the local market as well as export market. But selling in the export market has become a little easier than selling in the local market, because still, I think for most industries, world market is fairly buoyant. So local market, unlike the local market, export markets are still vibrant, and exporters are still in a position to sell their products at fairly competitive prices, especially due to the rapid depreciation of the rupee, which is offsetting the local inflation. So what is happening is, while the exports become competitive, local manufacturing will become very uncompetitive. But the problem is, due to the current foreign exchange policy adopted by the government, and also the impact of the foreign policies towards exchange rate we adopted in the recent past, the exporters are not fully bringing their export proceeds back to the country, creating a lot of pressure on our exchange rate through declining foreign exchange reserves. So that is putting a lot of pressure on the supply chain of a lot of companies. So supply chain is getting disrupted. Now there is great uncertainty about fuel availability in the country, gas availability in the country, and also as far as the industries are concerned, the entire raw material supply chain is under tremendous pressure. And we know through the chambers that a lot of factories have either curtailed production or stopped production due to non-availability of raw materials, as they are not in a position to open letters of credit to import such raw material. So the market has become very challenging, and added to that are the global challenges. So global challenges are emanating from the COVID-19 pandemic. The entire supply chain worldwide got significantly disrupted, and that creating a lot of pressure on a lot of manufacturing companies. Then what is happening here is the freight cost. Freight cost also started going up very rapidly, and that has created a situation where the exporters themselves are unable to quote prices for their export buyers. So overseas buyers are not in a position to assess the landed cost of products when they order the products for their market from various countries, because from different countries freight costs have gone up as much as 4 to 5 times really. So that is creating a lot of pressure on export companies. Now what we see is that not only the freight cost has gone up, actually freight time, the ocean time also has increased significantly. But the time, 3 to 4 weeks time taken by a vessel to reach, say from Colombo port to a port like San Francisco is today 3 months. And even after 3 months, those ports are not releasing containers. So as a result of that, a lot of challenges are being faced by the export companies as well. And then the Ukrainian war, Russia-Ukraine war, has also created a major supply issue in raw materials worldwide. Say, for example, in our own industry, Ukraine is a very significant and a big supplier of ball clay to factories world over. And all the ball clay mines are located in eastern Ukraine Donbass area, which is under heavy fighting right now, and there is no ball clay supplies to a lot of factories in the world, in Italy, Spain, China, even in India. But we are in Sri Lanka, we are immune to a certain extent because we don't rely on such clays. But what happens is when these things happen, the local as well as global supply situations change, and that create a crisis for some companies and also opportunities for other companies. So we need to understand how we can seize these opportunities that arise due to these issues. Then what happens is when manufacturers who provide goods and services to local and export markets operating especially in Sri Lanka with the challenges that are increasing every day, will have no choice but to convert large part of their local sales to export sales, because the local market, as I said, when the inflation catches up, actually right now I would say in Sri Lanka there is spiraling or runaway inflation in the country, and that is reducing the people's real income to a meager levels. And as what will happen is basically the demand for a lot of products and services will decline rapidly. And when this decline takes place and the companies are unable to pass down the cost increases in its entirety to the consumer, they'll have to, as I said earlier, market pricing, and the market pricing will be sometimes below cost. So what will happen is these local companies will be compelled to look at export markets, and if they have not been exporting in the past due to probably uncompetitive exchange rate or uncompetitive pricing, they will take a while to find overseas buyers, because finding overseas buyers is not easy. It takes sometimes 3 to 4 years, maybe 5-6 years to find a buyer and develop a buyer. So the companies that have been traditionally exporting at least a little bit of their production will be in a better position to increase their exports to the world market, and other companies will continue to struggle. So what we need to understand is that costing will become a very, very important exercise in this whole game. Now, if you take, as Professor mentioned, state-owned enterprises efficiency in Sri Lanka is at a very low ebb. I will combine this with the local industry later on within the next few minutes. Now, while preparing myself for this session, I looked at certain literature and I saw the Advocata Institute recently released a paper which said in Sri Lanka, Sri Lankan state-owned enterprises, efficiency is below 1%. Efficiency is below 1% in our state-owned enterprises. So it is a significant burden on the entire economy. And 57 state-owned enterprises lose over 100 billion rupees every year. I think the top out of 527 state-owned enterprises, if you take the first 250 enterprises, they lose nearly 300 billion rupees every year. So that is adding to the cost of the local production. That is adding to the cost of local manufacturers. So what we'll have to do is now, what we'll have to do in the future is demand from the private sector answers to this cost of production, answers to the increasing cost of production in state-owned enterprises. Because if the state-owned enterprises cannot be made efficient, then the local economy cannot be made efficient. So it will be a major question we will have to answer in time to come if we were to develop our industry. Now, if you look at the protests that are taking place in the country, what do these protesters ask? They need changes in policies and the structure of the governance. They need transparency in activities. They need steady availability of their needs. And finally, they need ethical and law-abiding government. Ethical and law-abiding government, to me, actually what they are looking for is basically, number one request is don't steal. Don't steal. That is a basic tenet of ethics, really. Don't steal, because stealing and corruption have become a major component of cost in this country. So people will have to demand revelation of cost of production and services by state-owned enterprises. And we will have to deep dive into every element of cost going forward if we were to transform this economy and make it a vibrant economy, post this protest. That is why we also advocate through other institutes we serve in. We advocate that people's mindset also should be changed in such a way that they don't look to live on subsidies. They will have to get ready to earn their living, work hard to earn their living, because the subsidies alone will not be able to develop this country or eliminate poverty. So what we'll have to do is basically through this societal and managerial costing framework and the standards, we have to create a culture where people as a way of life start asking for the real cost of goods and services they consume really. And to ascertain the real cost of goods and services they consume, the institutions that produce such goods and services will have to keep proper cost records. Without proper cost records, they will not be able to identify the actual cost of products and services they produce. If we keep proper cost records only, we will be able to understand and identify where is waste, where is corruption, where is pilferage, and what are the other types of costs. Because people will no longer be ready to pay anything for corruption and inefficiencies embedded in the cost of production of goods and services they consume. Because that culture is beginning to develop in Sri Lanka, and people will start becoming very vociferous when they see corruption, waste, and pilferage. Now, what will happen is one of the key things, even the government to support the economic growth, the support development of public enterprise is to reduce the budget deficit through reduction of expenditure. And in companies also, we will have to do the same thing. We will be compelled to relook at our cost structure. Without looking at the cost structure, we will never become efficient. Now, my experience is, I would like to say, through my experience, inside every business, there is another business. Inside every factory, there is another factory. Inside every business, there is a more efficient business. Inside every factory, there is a more efficient factory. You have to unearth that more efficient business and also the more efficient factory. To unearth that more efficient business and the more efficient factory, you will have to deep dive into your processes and cost. Every item, every element of cost, you will have to understand, and you will have to, if you understand, you will control. If you understand, you monitor. If you monitor, you will control. In fact, actually, through my experience, what I would like to say is, at Lanka times, when we embarked on this exercise, actually, I must say that after I became the chairman of this cost and management accounting standard board, I understood much better, honestly, the need to deep dive into different types of costs and all types of costs. And in the last few years, we have identified 16 types of waste in our factories. I would like to basically elaborate a little before I conclude. We identified 16 types of waste in our factories, through which we saved in the last 4-5 years millions of dollars, really, millions of dollars. Now, one is the line organization loss. Now, what I want to impress upon the participants is that cost cannot be identified only by looking at assertions in the P&L or the assertions in the cost record. You have to deep dive into such an extent to understand what is coming from the flow to the cost record, really. What is coming from the flow as cost of production. Now, in that context, we have identified line organization loss, which means the right person not doing the right job. That also you have to understand, because that is also part of your cost. Then number 2, the motion loss, the flow layout not being efficient to handle the the smooth flow of production in a factory. Then logistics loss, energy loss, raw material waste, measurement and adjustment losses, yield loss, plant shutdown losses, breakdown losses, setup and adjustment losses, tool replacement losses, then startup losses, then minor stoppages, and also idle loss sign, and also the machinery speed loss. So like that, we have identified 16 losses that can occur in a factory, and that is having an impact on the cost of production. So if you don't identify these losses, identify what is giving rise to the cost of production in a factory, you will not be able to monitor. What you monitor, you control. If you don't monitor, you cannot control. When you control, you start documenting. And to document, you have to have standards. You have to have standards so that the factories, among factories, you will be able to compare and contrast. You know, what is my cost of production as opposed to the cost of production of another factory? What is my cost of running the operation as opposed to another business, cost of running another business? So it becomes vitally important for us to understand the importance of complying with standards in costing, both societal and managerial. Societal means, of course, the goods and services provided by the state, and the managerial applies to the private enterprises. So what I want to, in conclusion, what I want to say is that this costing, managerial costing standards can definitely make a positive change in the country, in the economy, especially when you look at the current status of our economy. If you look at the current status of our state enterprises, current status of our private enterprises, and the current challenges faced by private enterprises. So if you don't do this, I mean, doing this will not guarantee success, but if you don't do this, I can confidently tell you, it will guarantee you failure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mahendra. Thank you very much for that very insightful speech. We have learned a lot from your speech. Thank you very much for giving us practical insights as to what we have to do in order to improve our costing and pricing and in order to make products more affordable to consumers. Now, you have mentioned, as well as Professor has mentioned, the setup of the Cost and Management Accounting Standards Board, and also, I must say, now I'm also in the technical committee of this board. We are receiving a tremendous support from local and foreign consultants. And in this regard, I must say, I have to mention Mr. A.N. Raman, who is our next speaker. He is giving us enormous support. He is like a guru, he is correcting us, he is advising us, and he is the main brain behind the societal costing concept. He is the one who has been behind this societal costing concept, and he is the one who has pushed us to include this societal costing concept in our framework. So Mr. A.N. Raman, the former president of South Asian Federation of Accountants, and also Mr. Raman now is working as a consultant for many organizations, including TVS Group, Ashok Leyland Group, Godrich and Boyce, LMW, WS Insulators, and so on. But more importantly, he has developed a cost maturity model to identify the level or stage of cost accounting practices in any organization, the first of its kind in the world. So, sir, respectfully, I invite you to discuss about the societal costing, because I feel this is something that most of us are not fully aware of. Over to you, sir.
Thanks, Ruchira. Good evening to all of you. I am particularly indebted to Professor Lakshman Vatawala, my long-standing friend, for giving me this opportunity to be of utmost value to the Sri Lankan economy, and more so by being a member of the Institute of Certified Management Accountants of Sri Lanka. I'm equally happy in my association with Jay Sekhar as the chairman of the CMA's Cost and Management Accounting Standards Board. We have been enjoying working together. So now I'll start off from that document which chairman of the CMSA was referring to, which is a framework of the managerial and societal costing, which has to now play a major role in our Sri Lankan economy. So as he introduced, as well as Professor Lakshman Watawala was also explaining that this framework of managerial costing and societal costing has got two parts, but both of them brought into in one document. The managerial costing part speaks of the approach required in private enterprises, how they are going to meet the competitive environment by using this managerial costing tools. That is a major emphasis. Out of that, one particular tool of understanding the cost impact of the shop floor operations and eliminating the waste so that it can lead to a huge cost reduction in companies and profitability can be improved, cost can be brought down. This is exactly what Jayasekara sir was referring to in the form of the 16 forms of waste. So while explaining his case study and his company's own example, he has gone quite significantly a deep dive into the managerial costing part. Now, what I am going to do is come to the societal costing part. The word societal costing itself perhaps is a new terminology, and particularly becoming a part of a framework to be issued is a practice which has come in the South Asian region in particular. So we in our Sri Lankan Institute we have brought in the societal costing as a part of this framework itself. So what I'm going to do in the next 15 minutes or so, very quickly I will introduce this concept of societal costing, what it exactly means. And though Chairman has very nicely introduced, societal costing is largely applicable to that domain where the state or the state-run enterprises, they are the suppliers of the essential goods and services to the consumers of a nation at large. And the public interest has to be at the heart of the pricing of such goods and services. In that context, societal costing will have a very major role to play. That is exactly what Jayasekara sir has introduced as a concept to you. Now what I am going to do is, I will take conceptually step by step. I will introduce to you what a societal costing means in the context of what Mr. Jayasekara said. What are the major purposes of societal costing and how it works? And then after that, I'll also tell you in which countries societal costing is in a different way, or in the way in which we are telling they are all being practiced. This will be 50%. I will spend time on that. So after that, what I intend to do is, quite often when we talk conceptually and when we speak of high-flying documents, people at the ground reality, they seldom understand or get the grip of these concepts what we are talking of. So what I'm going to do is take a case study of how a societal costing is applied in a country like United Kingdom and how the government is playing a role in introducing the concept of societal costing. I'll show you the example itself, and as a result of that example, what sort of documents got created and how it is being used in that economy, I will try to explain to you in 5 to 10 minutes. So totally, I will take 15 minutes in this presentation. I will share the screen. Shanti, can you give me the screen?
Okay, fine, that's fine. Should be all right now.
Yeah, it's okay. So as I open the PowerPoint, you have to tell me so that I can, I am sure of you are seeing the slides. So is this clear?
We can see. Yeah.
Okay.
You can,
so I start with this,
if you can enlarge it, that will be good. If you put to slide.
Slideshow?
Yeah, slideshow.
It's fine.
Right, okay.
So for the beginners, many of the participants who would like to understand from the basics, what is this terminology called societal costing, which suddenly Mr. Raman is using, and he says it's a part of a framework issued in our country. So again, starting from that, the Institute of Certified Management Accountants of Sri Lanka has issued a framework of how managerial costing and societal costing would be deployed in the countries running of private enterprises as well as the public enterprises. As far as the societal costing part is concerned, please understand that societal costing as a terminology connotes that domain which standardizes the measurement, reporting of cost information, measurement and reporting of cost information to achieve uniformity for analysis for an action at a national level. So let's say we want to take a viewpoint of the public interest of the Sri Lankan citizens in our heart, and we would feel that whether the citizens of Sri Lanka are living in the northern province or in the southern province, either in Trincomalee or in Hambantota, they should all get the power at the same price. And the price at which a power is given, or any other interest where the government is a major supplier, maybe, or in certain cases the government may not be a major supplier, there can be a private player, but because of the situation in the country, we would not allow a free arm of pricing. So you would like the government as a regulator of that particular industry would expect the industry to price the goods or services at a very reasonable or affordable level, so that all sections of the society, irrespective of the province, will be able to consume that particular good or that particular service. So when that is the objective of a Sri Lankan government regulator, or it can be the department belonging to a particular ministry, they would like to take a national view. They want to analyze the cost structure of reaching this material to all the places inside the country. They would like to have a national level data, and that to a national level data of the cost structure, because we can't vary the price from province to province. So I would like to have a national average of a cost structure, but built from the bottom up. Suppose there are 5 or 6 enterprises producing the same thing in 5-6 provinces throughout the country. I would take a national average and then come with a national average cost structure and give a uniform price, which may not be cost plus, may be cost plus, may not be cost plus. I can fix a price. If it is below the cost, then allow a subsidy to those manufacturers, but knowing fully well this is the real cost and this is the affordable price. So this sort of approach has its roots in the societal costing. So the principles of societal costing and the various concepts behind that, along with the template which has been issued in this framework by the Cost and Management Accounting Standards Board, we have done that. That particular atom keeps this at the heart. And therefore, the dimensions of this particular information, that it is measured with reference to certain standards, cost accounting standards, it has been averaged, brought down to a national level, and for the purpose of a national decision making, keeping all the stakeholders in mind. These are all very broad features which are governing the societal costing approach. So this is basically the philosophy behind the societal costing. So why there is a need for societal costing? I have moved on to the next slide for the benefit of participants. In case the slide has not moved on, please tell me. So I have moved on to the next slide. Why there is a need for the societal costing in the economy? There is a need for a societal costing because in many parts of the world, other than the very largely advanced countries and developed economies, there's a large chunk of the population which is still below the poverty line or just crossing the poverty line. And there are many countries where such a population exists, but however, these countries are fast progressing towards the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. And they need a mechanism of monitoring and measuring at what affordable price, whether at a targeted price, the society is being catered to. So we need a framework, we need a mechanism. And in that ecosystem, the societal costing can work very well. So societal costing would do a fantastic role in any economy which is creating an ecosystem for moving towards the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, particularly in a context where structural reforms have not yet been completed. Structural reforms are not yet over. The supply chains have not been stabilized, particularly the supply chains of essential goods and services. We are yet to stabilize, and because of this reason, the goods and services which are of essential in nature, it cannot be left completely to the market forces. Such products and services can be as simple as, for example, sugar, which is consumed in a daily man's life. Basically, I am a diabetic. Now I don't consume sugar, but I can't presume the same for others. So sugar is a basic commodity. Sugar can be subject to a what is called as a national level controlled pricing as an essential good. It can be as simple as a bread, or it can be as simple as an electricity as a service, or it can be, for example, fertilizer supplied to the farmers, and it had to be at controlled or a regulated prices, and you cannot leave it to the market forces. However, in such economies, structural reforms are being carried out, but before complete structural reforms are carried out, I need a very good market control mechanism which regulates the pricing, and I need a measured, monitored cost information which is reliable and dependable because it is with reference to a national standard. In these situations, the cost accounting standards as a part of societal costing would work very well, because the government has a major role to play in the fair supply and pricing of essential commodities and services. And in such situation, the government has to ensure it is not only the consumers' consumers' welfare should be in the mind, but it is also important that those who are manufacturing those goods, like for example, there can be a manufacturer of a fertilizer whose products are being controlled, or there can be a sugar crushing factory which buys sugarcane from the farmers and it is producing sugar. That sugarcane company also, the sugar company also has to survive. It can't sell at a loss. So we need to have a very good balancing of the supplier of essential goods and services. It can be a state or it can be a private enterprise. We also need to keep at heart the affordable pricing for the consumers. So to balance the interest of affordable price of the essential goods and services for the consuming public vis-a-vis the suppliers of such services, the government needs a reliable, measured and monitored cost information. This is exactly where societal costing as a terminology plugs in with all its ecosystem of cost accounting standards, measurement of cost, recording of cost in cost reports, etc. And hence, because of this, there is a need for framework in such economies wherein the government plays a reliable role of picking up cost information. So that is the role of the societal costing. So having said this, are there countries in the world which are practicing societal costing, or is it suddenly our institute in Sri Lanka has come up with this? There are many countries, but I am giving you only 4 examples on the screen. I have moved to the third slide. There are examples of developed as well as developing economies using the societal costing either in the form of a tools or in the form of cost accounting standards. For example, if you take the case of United Kingdom, I'm going to show you the case study of that, where the national health care is completely under the control of the government. The best possible care in cardiovascular, or it can be in oncology or in any area, the United Kingdom guarantees free national health care for its citizens. Canada also has adopted societal costing tools for its healthcare administration. Australia is yet another example in the healthcare where societal costing tools have been deployed in administering the healthcare policies of the Australian government. In India, where I live, in our country, particularly for agriculture, like for example, there are a huge number of farmers in this vast country for producing, for example, paddy, and these farmers, they take the paddy to the marketplace, and by and large middlemen buy from these farmers and they sell it in the market. So middlemen don't really add any value, but they make a margin. So as a result, this is there definitely in Sri Lanka also, the government announces a guarantee price. So the government announces a guarantee price. For example, hypothetically, let us say the guarantee price of a quintal is 500 rupees. So the farmer wants to sell, and in the market they are trying to sell only 450 rupees. So why should the farmer incur a loss of 50? So he will sell it to the government at 500 rupees. So that is how the guarantee price works. But how this guarantee price of 500 is worked out? The government will have a very good societal costing mechanism of picking up the cost of production of paddy in different sizes. Someone may be having 5 acres, someone may be having 500 acres, someone may be having 50 acres. The implements they use may be different. Someone may be having mass production, mass cultivation, like they use tractors, etc. Someone else may be using a natural manure. Someone else may be using an artificial manure. In a small farmer, his family only may be working, for which there is no cash flow in the form of wages, but it is an imputed cost. Whereas in some other place there can be hired laborers. So there is a different set of resources. So a very good societal costing tool is in place in the government to understand the cost of cultivation of paddy, and they connect it with the guarantee price for the farmers. Similarly, for fertilizers, there are lots of fertilizer companies in India, right from the city where I live in Chennai till the northern place. Several companies manufacture fertilizers like urea, NPK, potassium, etc. All these companies, it is compulsory, mandatory in India to submit what is the cost of production of this fertilizer to the government. There is a ministry called the Ministry of Fertilizers, or the Ministry of Food and Fertilizers, where fertilizers is one department. So this format will tell what is the cost of production as per the various fertilizer. So the government may fix a price, which is, let's say the cost of production of urea is 500 rupees per quintal. The government may fix a price of 300 rupees to the farmer because the farmer can't afford 500 rupees. But at the same time, the fertilizer company cannot spend 500 and sell it at 300 to the farmer. So they would need a subsidy from the government. So this subsidy is fixed based on this cost sheet. So a cost sheet is submitted by this agricultural fertilizer companies using the cost accounting standards. They compute the cost fertilizer wise. They submit it to the government. So the subsidy is fixed based on this cost sheet, and the subsidy is reimbursed. So, but now here the government would very clearly know that this is the cost of production. This is where the farmer is benefiting, and this subsidy is the part of my expenditure budget. So these are all some of the very good examples. Globally, you will find of societal costing. So I'm going to take one example quickly and show you how in United Kingdom, a case study of societal costing, what is called in National Health Service called as a NHS scheme in United Kingdom. So this NHS scheme is a free health care for the UK citizens delivered through the government-owned hospitals. There is a network of government-owned hospitals throughout the country, maybe in each province or county, fully equipped with modern technology. Even in the remotest village or in a district where there is a government hospital, they will be able to perform a bypass surgery as good or as efficient in a way a bypass surgery is performed in perhaps the finest hospital in London. Different types of healthcare activities in this sort of healthcare environment are grouped in a code called HRG. That is a grouping of for example, a cardiovascular problem will come under one HRG. A nephrology relating to kidney procedure will come under some other HRG. So HRG, you please take it as if it is an SKU of a particular hospital. It is an SKU or a stock keeping unit of a particular hospital. So for this HRG, the government, which is the major administrator of this healthcare service, needs data points of quality, whether it has been delivered at an affordable price for the UK citizen, and delivery has happened very nicely at a very, very high quality. Though there are private hospitals which coexist, but the government hospitals are one of the finest examples of giving the best quality, cost and delivery for the UK citizens. The healthcare in the government hospitals is of a very high quality, but completely the funding is from the government. They are not expected to price. Maybe in some cases there can be some exemptions, but what these healthcare hospitals will have to do, they will have to spend on various hospitals every quarter or every 6 months or every year. And the spending HRG wise, that is specialty wise, for cardiac so much of spending, for nephrology so much of spending, that sort of spending will have to be proved to the union government, the central government or the government of UK. The individual hospitals will have to compile their actual cost of spending. Now comes the word cost of spending, which is a societal costing, because the budget allocation from the UK government to the each hospital, let's say there are 100 hospitals in UK, each of this 100 hospital comes under a budget allocation as a unit recipient of the budget of the union government or the UK government. So a budget allocation takes place hospital wise, which is projected HRG wise using a tool called activity based costing. So this, for example, there is a hospital example in, let's say, in Warwickshire. So Warwickshire as a county will have to project, I will be, based on the demand, I will be making 100 bypass surgeries in the next 1 year. For each 100 bypass surgery, this is the pound of expenditure required for either inpatient treatment or for medicine or for doctor's fee. So multiplied with 1000 or 100 operations or 100 surgeries, this is the funding required for bypass surgery. So like that, imagine for each of the HRG, which is a SKU of a hospital service delivered to the UK citizen, they have to project the cost to the central government or the UK finance ministry, which will in turn transfer the funds. So here, activity-based costing becomes a key guideline, which will have to be compulsorily adopted in the hospital as a societal costing tool based on which funds get administered. And they will not be able to get any price they want. Each hospital, they have to submit a cost sheet. The government looks at the cost structure and comes up with an annual average and fixes a price that this will be the price at which the a bypass will have to be performed, or a kidney transplant has to be performed, or some kidney cleaning has to be performed, or very simple operations like dialysis, which have become very common today. What will be the price per dialysis for a patient? All these things are fixed based on this cost structure. So how does the government do it? Now comes a very important point. I am going to share with you a document. I will stop sharing this document and share another document, which you see for I'm not going to present you completely, but you just have a glance of how such a document exists. So is this document visible, Jayasekara?
Yeah, we can see. Yeah.
You can see Lakshman. So now you see at the top right corner, this is a document issued by the Ministry of maybe Health, where there is one Department of Health, or Finance Ministry, Department of Health. So this Department of Health has issued this document called NHS Costing Manual. Now I will link it up with our cost accounting standards of societal costing. So this NHS costing manual, when it has been issued, it has got a structure which you see on the screen when it has been circulated, and in the description you will find it is targeted for the finance directors of the various hospitals. So this is how the manual has been introduced. Now comes, I am going to reside on this screen for a few minutes. You see the contents of a typical national costing manual. I'll give you 1 minute for you to have a quick glance. Instead of listening to me, you just have a quick glance on this. In the meanwhile, I'll sip my coffee. So you will find a typical National Health Service costing manual, which is compulsory to be used by all the hospitals applying the societal costing. They need to adopt certain costing standards. PLICS is the patient level information costing system. Principles and concepts which need to be used. So applying the principles, what are all the various levels? Level 1, establishing the control totals for costing, then producing a high-level control totals, etc., like that. And what is the minimum standard categorization of cost? They have issued, this is a, let us say, from 50 or 60-page document, which tells completely in the form of a manual. Now, in UK, there is only, it's a very small country, and let us say only healthcare is controlled through this sort of societal costing. But in a very vast country like India, or in a big country like China, where lots of items, not necessarily with reference size of the country, based on the level of development, it's not only health. We have also put in energy under the essential goods and services. We have brought in banking, let us say, under essential goods and services. Let's say we have brought in even bread production and supply under the essential goods and services. So in these cases, the application will be so vast. So the application becomes so what? Every ministry cannot be issuing this sort of standard. Like power ministry cannot issue a separate costing manual. The bread agricultural ministry need not issue a separate costing manual. That becomes an enormous task. So that is why these sort of economists, they have created an institute of certified management accountants, like what Sri Lankan parliament has done. So the task of issuing such costing guidance is given to these institutes, which in turn come up with cost accounting standards. So either you have costing manuals like this, industry-wise, product-wise, etc., which is a very elaborate task, or like financial accounting standards, IFRS, you don't have for industry-wise. They are all generic principle level, high-level document. In the same way, a high-level document need to be issued. These are all the cost accounting standards and procedures which need to be adopted by all these companies in Sri Lanka producing the goods of common interest, public interest. There will be a cost accounting standard framework. That is exactly what a part of the societal costing framework issued by the CMA, our CMA, Sri Lankan CMA board a few months back. So that is very important. Because of this, it's very important that the finance community in Sri Lanka, as well as the government, goes back to the document, connect it with the application areas in the government. It can be power, it can be fertilizer, it can be paddy, it can be sugar. Connect it with the various areas and come up with how to apply this in our company, and how to apply this in our product, and what sort of cost accounting guidances we will require from the institute. So it is one single nodal agency in countries like Sri Lanka, where you don't issue costing guidance manual industry-wise like what UK has done. So in UK, the approach of societal costing is different. In Sri Lanka, the approach of societal costing is different. In India, the societal costing will be the same like Sri Lanka, but basically they all come under one basket called societal costing, where the costing information is deployed for the public consumption. Now I will wind up by sharing you with one very nice example, which is picked up from how the national average comes in UK. You can see that example, how you find the national average of, let's say, 100 hospitals are there. I will expand the percentages for your benefit. The relevant area I will show. Now you can see here, this is the national schedule of different cost for the year 2000. Let us say 100 hospitals are there. They have consolidated this into this 100 hospitals. So I will now a little bit zoom because it is zoomed out too much. Now you can see here, on the right side, you will find what is that number of activities. Like for example, the first cardiovascular accident where there is a nervous system got infected and compounded with encephalopathy with a very high CC score of a complicated cerebrovascular operation. 2,784 operations have been carried out in United Kingdom in that year, with a unit cost of so much and a total cost of so much. So how this particular information has come? So you will find this information for every procedure. I'll now go back to the top sheet. You will find here, this is what the procedure is all about. I was explaining to you that HRG. So this is what is called as the total HRGs. So all the blue color you will find all the HRGs. If I go and click into this HRG group, under EL, you will get the unfold. I'm going to now click in EL. So I'm clicking in EL, and now you will find under all this group of what is called as the EL, you will find various individual surgeries or procedures which have been carried out. It can be a complicated accident-induced nervous system failure, or it can be a simple one, or it can be, you can see roll number 11, hemorrhagic cerebrovascular disorder, which doesn't come through an accident. It is another disorder. So a disorder wise is an SKU. The group of that is what is called, I opened this elective inpatient treatment. So whether it is an inpatient treatment or outpatient treatment, categorized as call-based personal visits, outpatient, inpatient, with limited days, extended days, with a huge number of variations, and based on the complications they have undergone, the UK system, National Health Service, uses a tool called activity-based costing as a societal costing tool. All the 100 hospitals compile this sort of information, HRG code-wise and SKU-wise, consolidate it and send it to the Department of Health for a review. And that is how, what is the price at which this particular cardiovascular accident with this particular procedure will have to be performed for a citizen, that will be fixed by the government. So a citizen would know whether he performs a dialysis or whether he performs, you can see a brain tumor, you can see row number 16, brain tumor removal or cerebral cyst with the CC score of 11, whether this sort of a simple operation complexity of 11, or if you go down and see complexity score of 2 to 3, it may not be a very high level brain tumor, it can be the simpler form of brain tumor. Based on the complexity, the cost would change. So to that extent, the maturity of cost management is there in countries like this. So in countries like ours, we need to move on into such a structured societal costing and appreciate the need for adopting cost accounting standards for national decision making. So this is where I would end my presentation, and thanks Lakshman for giving me an opportunity for sharing this.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your insightful presentation. You're always full of information. So now in the agenda is the panel discussion. Mr. Mahendra, are you still available?
No, he just went.
He left?
I think he's just leaving, yeah.
I can just take maybe one or two questions if there are questions on my presentation.
Okay, Mr. I have to leave. Very quickly, I would like to ask about the future of the Cost and Management Accounting Standards Board. Now, yeah. What can you say? What we need to do in the
No, as you know, we have. Am I echoing?
No, yeah. Yes, echo.
Yes. What we have done is basically we have unveiled the exposure draft for public comments, and we are waiting for the public comments. And once the public comments are received, we will keep it open for another few weeks. Once the public comments are received, what we will be doing is to have workshops to educate multiple sectors in the country about the need for societal and managerial costing standards, Ruchira. And thereafter, we will identify sector by sector and we'll start issuing standards.
Okay. Professor, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think what he said is correct. The additional thing is what Mr. Raman mentioned, that where we try to work out some case studies. So some of them who are here will be able to help in that.
Okay. Thank you, Roger. Thank you, Mr. Mahendra.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll move into the formal panel discussion. Let me introduce the panelists very quickly. We have a number of panelists today representing various sectors. We have, first of all, Ms. Ramya Veerakon, a past president of National Chamber of Exports. Then we have Dr. Jagat Piris. He is the former chairman and managing director of Royal Fernwood Porcelain. Mr. Asanka Rajapaksha, managing director of OTR Wheel Engineering Lanka Private Limited. Ms. Jeevani Aberatna, director of finance and IT, Eka PLC. Mr. Vasanta Nandasiri, chief financial officer, Siam City Cement Lanka Limited. Right. So now, first of all, before I start the panel discussion, I would like to give you a few minutes, maybe about two to 3 minutes, for you to elaborate on what you feel about the present challenges facing costing and pricing of products for local and export markets. Maybe I can start with Ms. Ramya. Ms. Ramya, are you there?
Yes, we are making exports on apparel, and in apparel the costing is it's a matter of that we have the cost sheet which is required by some buyers, and the confirmation is before the confirmation of the order, and the costing is done according to the standard, that is we call the CM, according to the standard minute value. The cost of the raw material is a stable cost. That is the fabric and accessories, everything. But the what will change in the standard minute value, that is work by the work study and the time study department. So this is how we cost a product, and always the buyer gives a cost, the price of the product, and we have to match with that price. So in certain cases, if we go beyond the buyer's price, we have to adjust in our certain ways, and sometimes the buyer will accept our pricing after going through and under negotiations. So this is how we do our costing, and also the standard minute value. Apart from the standard minute value, with the inflation, that is like with fuel, electricity, etc., it will change. So with our costing report, all this being added, it is very transparent to the buyer what the cost is. But we cannot go beyond the consumption of the raw material, because that is standard. Anything else can vary, but not the consumption of the raw materials going into the product. So this is how we do our products in costing. And anything else, I think.
I'll come to you, Dr. Ms. Ramya. Dr. Jagat, now moving on. Now, Ms. Ramya was telling material cost should be it should be consistent, but the standard minute value can change. Do you have a different opinion than that?
I think I agree with Ms. Ramya. There certainly are times where the customer will give a target price. So when the target price is set, it's up to the factory to somehow match that price. So for this, the costing is very, very important. You need to have a breakdown of all costs. So there may be certain costs that we may sort of ignore when pricing, because they are fixed costs. Anyway, you have to bear those costs. And if the customer is important, and if you want to get that customer into your company, probably you may have to certain times that you may have to forego some of the absorption of the fixed costs. So there is some leeway there, where some room for negotiation. Then also, if there is certain areas where Ms. Ramya said, sometimes the material cost is fixed. You can't help that. You can't, unless you negotiate strongly with your suppliers and get the material cost reduced. But there are certain areas where you can reduce your costs. For example, Mr. Mahendra mentioned about manufacturing cost efficiencies, where he mentioned about 16 areas where the cost could be reduced. Then there's also energy efficiencies, because there are certain steps the factories can take to increase the energy efficiency. So those are the areas that you could target to meet the set price by the customer.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. But I would like to ask, maybe some other panelists can answer this question. Now, in a situation like this, when there is inflation and when there is depreciation of rupee, especially if you are a net importer. Now, net importer, if you are an importer, how can you keep the material cost consistent? Jeevani, maybe you can answer.
Okay, so actually I work for an organization which is 99% export. So in terms of actually, even though I'll just like to touch on while even Ms. Ramya will know, while a lot of people think as exporters that we are somewhat cushioned in this situation that the country is facing, we are not, because actually we import and the import costs have risen significantly. And Mr. Mahendra also touched on the freight cost, which is an external cost, and that has skyrocketed on the one hand. So, and so that has to be managed very carefully. Just to go beyond from your question, even working for a company which is, you know, more than 50% value addition and sourcing raw materials locally, we are seeing an exponential increase in local inputs. And it is like week to week or day to day transport costs. And then also the other problem is that the raw material suppliers are thinking about exports of the raw material. So we have always tried to lobby with the government and say, you know, you should encourage value-added exports. But in this kind of crisis situation, it's like there's even no one to speak to. So since I am a net exporter, in terms of import costs, we are sort of somewhat cushioned. But in this situation, actually, you know, I think the depreciation was too rapid, and we have to look after the society in terms of we have to look after the other stakeholders as well.
Thank you, Jeevan. Asanka and Vasanta, you both are professional accountants. I would like to get your views on this.
Okay, Ruchira, thank you very much, and thank you, Professor, for inviting me for this important discussion. I think societal costing, very good concept. We need to elaborate more and debate more where we can apply for the betterment of the society. Okay, coming back to your question on the challenges, like if you look at I'm representing a company where we import 80% of our material and then we only sell locally. So if you look at the bigger challenges, most of our cost information are outdated every second, right? So so today maybe in the morning we update exchange rate to be 350, and then 1 or 2 hours later you get a different exchange rate. Or maybe in the morning you start with a distribution cost of X amount, and then after 2 hours or 3 hours you get a different distribution cost. To give you some kind of insights. Okay, people really see the exchange rate has been depreciated over 80% within about 30 to 45 days. But if you really look at the exponential impact on the many other areas, people only see the pricing. Yes, pricing is definitely important, we have to see, but I think understanding about the costing, especially where the industries are completely locally driven. So that is where I think we need to give them more education to the consumers as well, so they understand the real component of the product, right? And then the main thing what I would like to bring to the table is the ecosystem. It's not like we are not isolated, we may be a cement manufacturer, right? But if you look at the larger industry, we are catering into the construction industry at large. So if you look at the other raw materials for the construction industry, I can tell you one small data. The cement composition in the construction is about 10%, even less than 10%, right? So if you look at the overall ecosystem, so that is where I think we need to really focus on where we can improve. So the bigger challenge for pricing, especially the costing before pricing, it's the volatility of the cost structure. And whatever the system you have, you can have the most sophisticated system in the world. We are actually using SAP HANA, right? But the data coming out of the system is basically outdated. The time we are going to make decision. Every day we are losing, millions of rupees due to the revaluation. We have been struggling to repatriate funds for last 8-9 months. A lot of payables in US dollar terms is actually hanging in our balance sheet, big amounts, especially to our parent company, because they have been supporting us to get the raw material and somehow supply the cement to the market, right? So we have been actually supplying to the market for last 6-7 months without any disruption. At the full capacity, being one of the largest cement manufacturer in the country and the only integrated manufacturer in the country. So we have been actually supplying the market even though there was a shortage. But with this the payable, US dollar payable balances, we have not been able to pay for last 8-9 months. Every day there's a revaluation loss which is coming below EBITDA as well. So a lot of challenges are there. Yes.
Thank you, Vasanta. Sankar.
Thank you, Ruchira, for inviting the CMA inviting for us to participate in this valuable conference at Vaina, right? So regarding your question, Ruchira, that it's an extremely challenging point that we are facing. Also, so actually that OTR Lanka is manufacturing wheels and rims for off-road vehicles. We are 100% export, right? We don't have customers in locally. So either directly or indirectly, we are exporting. So at this particular time, right, actually, we are facing a kind of the turbulent pricing structure, cost structure, because that we have to work with that our customers in long-term basis. We are not a commodity that we price today and we cannot change it tomorrow. So at least we need to maintain 6-month validity for a price given for a vehicle manufacturers. When we set the model and when we set the product, maintain the stability. It's really hard period for us to maintain the price stability. To maintain the price stability, that we need to maintain the cost stability. So it's not, practical these days. So what we are doing right now is that, we only monitor raw material changes that only pass to the customers, and all other variables in overhead we absorb internally. So this is the most challenging point right now. At the same time, other panelists talk about the shipping cost, right? It's a 5-6 times high when it comes to the landed cost from Lanka to countries like Canada, USA, and Europe. So what happens is that, so always the customer point of view, they think the price at the landed point. It doesn't matter that Lanka or China or Turkey, which country export, they consider a price from which location to their location at the landed point of view. So the whole cost structure right now has been changed with the two major factors for us right now. One is that the steel cost that is highly volatile right now in the market. At the same time, the shipping cost, right? So those two consist of almost about 80-85% of our whole cost structure right now when it comes to landed point. So all other 15%, somewhere around 20%, is only available for labor, energy, and all other cost structures. So I think, Ruchira, this is kind of good time to discuss this topic. Because that we need to standardize internally for the costing and management accounting concept in a two-way. What is that? So one is to organize ourselves in better decision making for industry practitioners. So we need to have a proper cost structure, proper monitoring mechanism to take our decision making process improve. On the other hand, so when it comes to compete in the globally, right, we need to have proper cost structure to understand where are the rooms available to improve and competitive our products through cost savings and kind of reduction options available. So those two together, I think that is a very vital point for us to discuss about that the product cost and pricing strategies. And then CMA is revealing this concept is very right time manner. I think Ruchira will discuss later on your questions so more in detail.
Thank you, Asanka. Now you have mentioned a very good point, Asanka. You have mentioned that when pricing the products, the business relationship is also very important. Now, my next question is now, are there any other factors that you will consider when you price the products? Now, say for example, if your main objective is to cover the cost and to make a profit, the desired profit, or just to build the business relationship, or to keep the long-term relationship, or are you looking at things like perceived value of customers?
Yeah, actually, Ruchira, these days, what happens is that, so we are not thinking on the profitability a lot, right? So we maintain our sustainability in marketplace. So relationship and then the continuation, the supply is the most vital point right now, rather than that we are thinking about how to pass the cost to the customers and all. Because that we need to maintain our proper volume to maintain the factory running in efficient way. So if we don't have that volume, that we cannot, even sustain the company. So what we do right now is that, so we maintain as much as possible, the price stability by absorbing internal cost. On the other hand, that as we are earning dollars, so rupee depreciation has a positive impact for us, to cover the local cost. That will add an advantage to maintain the price stability over the import raw material cost.
Vasanta, now what about your situation? You are a net importer, as far as I know.
Yeah, that's right. So as I explained, 80. Let me give a little bit of an insight, in the cement manufacturing. Even though we produce cement from limestone in Sri Lanka, still we need coal and gypsum. There are these two very important raw materials we have to import, because we don't have coal in the country, and gypsum we have very limited stock. So even to produce complete local cement, you need some raw material to be imported. So it's like sort of a big challenge right now, because if you look at today, as some of the panelists said, we have like this CFR cost. So we have the Pareto also there, like not only the cost. So the cost of these commodities, like maybe the clinker or the coal, due to so much of geopolitical issues, energy cost, like fuel is going up. So and the freight. So together with that, so CFR has gone up by 40-50% in dollar term. Let's forget about the currency, right? Let's forget about the currency for the time being. The CFR in dollar term also has increased, about 30-40% compared to last year, maybe last 2 years. So when it comes to pricing, or let's say costing, now, so you have the raw material import cost, plus then there are some added costs like port charges, the inland transport and all that, and then you have the local conversion cost, right? So what we can control and what we cannot control, so that we need to identify. So whatever you can control, controllable costs, like whatever the systems we have, whatever the way, the tools we have, whatever the costing and management techniques what we have implemented, is helping us to minimize our inefficiencies and our waste as much as possible. But that portion is very less, right? That portion is very less. And then on top of that, right, because of the dollar scarcity in the system, so you are not able to pay your dollar debts, as I told you. So which actually is not part of the product cost. Because if you look at, I'll give a very classic example. This is very interesting. From January till mid-March, we have been, costing our imports at 203, because that was the official rate. But whereas in the market, we knew there was a gap. Let's say at that time 250 or 260, or maybe right now it is at 360, right? So this 80% was not part of our production cost for the first quarter. If you look at our reporting, even our financial reporting, right? In our financial reporting, in our cost of goods sold, we have to whatever the extent is understated. Our cost should have been much higher. But when you compare your contribution or your gross profit or your revenue, right, with this cost, you are showing, okay, we are making money, but actually it's not the case. When you translate it back to the real exchange rate, because you couldn't pay your debt, it's actually very less. To tell you frankly, in some companies I have seen even negative, right? So so that is the point. We need to now see, okay, how we can do forward-looking costing and forward-looking pricing. So today, what we are actually doing is we have updated our costing tools to reflect the current cost. Like coming out of, a conventional way of costing the product. So we have actually developed outside our system, like, as the finance, because we need to do this business partnering with our sales team to, constantly monitor the market and constantly, change the pricing. It's not like, we have a, let's say, standard price for a product where customers is going to buy. There's a competition also. Like as you correctly said, Ruchira, I think Asank also stressed on that point. The customers also, like, looking at, they're comparing. So there's a competition in the country. There's a competition in the market. So we need to, respond to that also. Like you cannot have a stable or a fixed price. So we actually have a like an unconventional way of like looking at the costing, putting the real current cost and the forward-looking cost, and then coming up with whatever the possible cost of the product, let's say next 1 week or 2 weeks, and then looking at our contribution just to protect our desired margins, not to make any additional profit, just to protect our desired margin and to ensure a healthy return to the shareholders. And we should not forget that also. I think I want to emphasize that here, because we are 100% on foreign company, so we have foreign investors. We need to encourage FDIs to come in the near future. So if you are not going to make reasonable margin to the shareholders, right, and then definitely that will have a again cyclical effect in the medium to long term as well. So we need to look at in the cost as well as in the pricing, that we are making a healthy margin to the shareholder. So looking at everything, we do the pricing. But to tell you frankly, you can see in the bag, cement bag price would be 2,750 or something, but in real term, the realization, the actual realization to the company would be much less, because you have to look after your channel partners, you have to look after your distributors, you have to look after you have to look after the customer, like in terms of giving some rebates and all that. So it's not easy game. It's actually very dynamic, and it's like you are living. I mean, in a way, Ruchira, like good for professionals like us. Like we are living in the situation. We are no longer like people who is just doing bookkeeping, right? We are really now practicing our management accounting techniques, like thanks to CMA, disseminating. So whoever, like the people working with us, my team, we are actually now toward more like going towards the management and costing side rather than financial, right? Yeah.
Thank you, Vasanta. Dr. Jagat, I would like to ask this question from you. Now, is there a requirement, especially when it comes to foreign buyers, is there a requirement for you to maintain, for companies to maintain export records, in the sense cost calculation records or cost records, as we say?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. There are certain companies, especially the big ones. I have experienced some of those companies, worked with some of those companies in the past, where they would like to see our costs. So generally, in our local mentality is that costs are confidential. We don't have to disclose to everybody. But if you want to work with certain big companies, multinationals, they insist that you show their costs, show your costs. And also, if they feel that you have you have done some mistake, they point it out also and say that, look here, your cost is incorrect. You have priced it lower. And that type of assistance also they give. So it's both way around. If you have made a mistake and given a low price, they will correct it for you and say, look, you can't do it at this price. You will need this price, and they'll give the higher price. Their idea is this: they want long-term relationships. Correct. They don't want you to go bankrupt because we are doing business with them. So they make sure that this particular company is stable and is a long-term partner for those big companies. So because of that, I think it's a genuine request looking at your cost sheets. So earlier I was very reluctant, but later I found that it was a genuine request, and they in fact try to help us by looking at our costs.
Now, from the chamber level, is there a facilitation process to provide these cost accounting records for the buyers?
No, we don't, because we are a chamber which is mainly small and medium enterprises. So most of our companies would like to keep their cost records confidential.
Right. Now, I would like to ask this question again from exporters who are here. Now, is there any advantage is there any advantage that you can explore by including the societal cost in your cost calculation? Jeevani, maybe you can start.
Yeah, from my point of view, actually, and I have listened very carefully to Mr. Raman's lecture. Actually, like that is not how we do the costing. So we have kind of certain products which are manufactured by, we are in activated carbon, which is a B2B product, and so which is a B2B product, and we have certain products which can be manufactured by a lot of activated carbon manufacturers all over the world. And then there are the products, only a few companies can manufacture, including us. So like this concept of sort of looking at average costing, or, looking at different factories and applying that does not actually apply to us. So while we have very robust costing systems to ensure that we do not sell at a loss, I must say that in the global markets, actually, we have to work with market prices. And we can kind of look at our cost structures and profit levels and decide prices in only a few products. Yeah, it's like a niche market, and like maybe, there are products, we are one of 2 manufacturers in the world who can manufacture that product with the correct product certifications. So, we have to work with market prices and the competition out there.
Is there any price advantage? Now, take example, like in the case of organic products, is there a price advantage if you can show that you are in the societal cost?
Ruchira, this is Raman here. I need to intercept here.
Yes,
for this simple reason. You have placed the question wrongly to a context which is not relevant at all, actually. Societal costing, right from the beginning, I have been telling in the presentation, is meant in those industries where the goods and services are essentially for the public interest, and the government has a role in controlling the price. So juxtaposing societal costing on a competitive industry where the pricing is done for the market forces, B2B, it would not fit in at all. That question is not relevant in the context of what you had expected her to answer. So naturally, she would have answered only this way, because societal costing is not relevant for the entire panel, what on honorable panel you have today. Societal costing would have been very relevant if you had some more panel members from Ceylon Electricity Board, or from the Apollo Hospital, which has been working in part of the Colombo and Henny Hospital, where government is controlling the price. Only in that environment, societal costing is relevant, not for the exporters. But what is important for all of them who have been explaining from honorable panel is managerial costing. You could have asked which is the managerial costing tool which is relevant for them. I would say there is something called target costing, where in target costing, you do not compute a cost and then fix a price. It is not done that way. The target costing part of the managerial costing framework would tell the industry, which is facing a competitive environment, like all these panel speakers were telling, market is giving you a price. Market tells you, our B2B or even a B2C market, that tells you this is the price which we can afford, and this is the value proposition I want. So given this value proposition, which is very relevant in the garment industry, which Madam was speaking, this is a value proposition, this is the target price, so manage your cost structure within that. So this is a situation where a target costing would be very relevant for them. So the way target costing is going to be advocated in the managerial costing framework would be the most relevant and suitable tool for most of the panel members who are working here, except that you should have an opportunity in the design where you tinker with the value proposition and not exactly only manufacture to the design print given by the foreign buyers. Like, for example, Asanka was explaining the OTR. In OTR, as I am aware of, is a business model. Most of the exporters give them the drawings. In certain cases, there may be relaxation. You have to only need to manufacture to the blueprint given by the. In that case, the opportunities become very less and still squeezed, because it is purely coming out of manufacturing efficiencies of the 16 pillars type, which our chairman was telling. So what is relevant for all the panel today, you put questions on managerial costing and not societal costing. Okay.
Ms. Raman, there's a question on societal costing. One person is asking, could we have a societal costing even with the courts and through the court system to make it cost effective?
Course means CMA course.
Courts, maybe the judiciary.
Courts, COURTS, courts.
Courts, yes.
That's a good question. In case, for example, but it will not be applicable to the charges which advocates are taking from their client. That is market price. But suppose there is a court fee and some court services being given, some court fee procedure is there where when you file a case, there has to be a methodology and there has to be a fee fixed by the government. In those cases, perfect application of societal costing is possible.
Okay, so there's another question on manufacturing. Now he is referring to soap manufacturing. Now recently, the prices of soap have increased tremendously in Sri Lanka. So I think he may be referring it to the prices of the raw materials. He is asking, okay, when maybe because of depreciation and so many other factors, when prices of raw materials are increasing, how can you use societal costing to work at a national level?
No. See, this is exactly what I'm telling you. The soaps are coming under price control of the government. By chance, let us say soaps are going to be declared as herein afterwards, the prices of the soaps will be controlled by the government. The price at which a soap manufacturer, either it is a, let us say a herbal beauty soap or it is a washing garment soap, the price at which a soap manufacturer can sell to the consumer, that MRP is going to be controlled by the government. Assume such an order is there. In case the government is going to declare such an essential service control, then the societal costing would work. If government has no intention of controlling the pricing, societal costing would not work. So if the government is going to declare an intention and bring the MRP of the soap under the government regulation, then the soap manufacturers would protest. So at that time, the government would say, no, you may sell it at this MRP, but the difference between your actual cost and the MRP which we are going to fix will give you as a soap subsidy. Here, the soap subsidy will be given to the soap manufacturers, but the consumers will get at a, let us say, a lower price. So here, how will the soap manufacturers will claim their subsidy? They have to produce a cost structure. They have to tell, this is the last year cost of manufacturing the detergent soap or the beauty soap, and this is the consumer controlled price at which we have sold to the public as desired by you. Now give us the money as a subsidy, and this is what we want based on the societal costing. So this is how the societal costing would work. For societal costing, the prima facie requirement is price control by the government in the national interest. If such a situation doesn't exist, societal costing would not work.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Vasanta, now I would like to ask this question from you. Maybe Asanka can answer later. Now, I'm not too sure to what extent you have read the cost and management accounting framework published by the CMA Sri Lanka. Now, for the CMA Sri Lanka cost and management accounting framework to be accepted and maybe for us to later introduce cost accounting standards, do you think that there should be a consistency between what we put out and the financial reporting standards, SLFRS and Sri Lanka accounting standards?
Yeah, okay. Before answering that, let me just add to the previous question, Ruchita, because I think cement was in the MRP list. I think if you can remember sometime back, 6 months back, cement was regulated. There was a regulated price. I think if you look at really what happened when the MRP was there, so whatever the increase, cost escalations we couldn't pass through. So the companies were really struggling to maintain the operations, and then which actually initially created a huge shortage in the market, right? So because importers stopped, importing, and then even for us we couldn't produce. So when even after the MRP was removed, we have been reporting our the costing and whatever the information requested by Consumer Protection Authority, we have been giving it. And if you look at most of the cement is because 80% imported, all the numbers are in the custom database. Like numbers are there, and we have been reporting, as I think Mr. Raman said, maybe at the regulation level, they can definitely do a comparison and publish this data so consumers can understand that they at least they know that pricing is not something, very higher, and, the companies are making exorbitant profit. It's just, surviving in the industry. Okay, coming back to the question. Yeah, I think, yes, obviously it will definitely help because at least on the reporting side, if you look at, our industry where we have to report to some extent our costing information to certain regulations like the consumer protection, or maybe even sometimes we are actually giving information to central bank, or maybe, some other interested group. So if there is a framework, like, like the finance reporting framework, if there is a framework, like, definitely it will help, right? So it will bring the consistency, and not only that, it will bring the reliability and the acceptability by the users, right? So let's say if I'm reporting, a cost sheet, or maybe, the cost structure of the cement, and if I say, this is in accordance with the framework published by CMA, right? So there's a credibility, the user definitely will, accept it. So I think I do agree, and then definitely we'll have to have a debate, and we need to discuss on the applicability, and then how we can mold it, to different industries, and how we can customize it where everyone will get benefit, keeping like what the other panelists said, confidentiality, because this can be price sensitive information. So maintaining all that, I'm 100% sure that this framework should help. Yeah.
Thank you, Vasanta, for your views. Asanka, do you have anything to add to that? My question was, the cost accounting framework, should that be consistent with the existing financial reporting framework?
Yeah, actually I agree, Ruchira. So basically what we need to do is that we need to have a proper kind of guidelines to the industries, right? How to do the costing, how to do that applications and all, right? This is some vague area when it comes to, even in the same that we are having a group of companies, Ruchira. So we are having branches in different countries, and we are also having ambiguity sometimes that how do each sister company is doing the costing, some sort of comparabilities. So I think that this is the area that we need to very clear about it as professions, that where to, locate our costing sheets and classifications, mostly classification issues. Sometimes when it comes to compare that some sort of expenditures that we classify in a different way than the other companies. So in that ground, what is the controllable cost? What is the direct cost and all that? Those are, I think that should be in a proper definitions and in proper guidelines. In that ground, the costing standards is very vital. That for a companies to maintain the consistent cost records, that is the base of all other decision making process. So that is why it is more critical. Sometimes when it come to the global cost structures, like that, the landed cost from raw material point to the end customer point, sometimes that companies are not profitable, not because of their internal processes, sometimes the external cost factors. So we need to understand which customer is profitable, which product is profitable. Sometimes which type of short-term decisions and long-term decisions to be taken when it comes to the ROI analysis and all, right? Sometimes that we make more investment, sometimes getting the results from conventional costing accounting systems and implement on those projects sometimes doesn't provide right returns and all because of that the correct recordings and correct classifications and correct monitoring of the costing system. I think this is the area, Ruchira, that we need to develop internally together with industries, how to do the costing. And another additional point I have to tell you that each industry has a kind of standards and benchmark systems. For example, that if we are in like steel fabricator company. So when it comes to welding products, what is the exact cost of the 1 inch of weld is more vital information to take the decisions. Sometimes that activity-based costing, the cost drivers and all, right? So they are not standardized and clear for everyone when it comes to the decision-making process. So in that ground, more understanding on cost parameters and cost classifications, reporting systems, together with the technology that everyone companies are now working with the ERP systems. Most of the difficult ERP modules are almost the manufacturing and WIP costing modules for any company, Ruchira. So how that the use of existing ERP systems to customize that cost reporting and all. Those are the areas that we need to think about when it comes to standard setting and all. I think that with that ground, finally, agree with all panelists that we need to develop this area together with, I mean, that the proper arms like that CMA initiation.
Thank you, Asanka. Now, since we are coming to the end of the panel discussion, I would like to get the views of panelists, each and every panelist. Very quickly.
Ruchira, there is a question, if I can just read it. It's mainly to Mr. Raman, that's given by our former Justice Tirani Tilakavardhana. Could we have societal costing even with the courts? Huh? Have you answered that, Mr. Raman?
I asked that question.
Yeah, right, okay.
Professor, now I would like to get the views of the panelists, each and every panelist, as to what they feel should happen at the national level to make costing and pricing more transparent at the present context.
If they can give the practical aspects, because that is what we need today.
Ms. Ramya, I would like to start from you.
Yes. Now, where the public sector is concerned, now I know the private sector, they have, each company have their model of very strict costing, and it is very transparent, especially for an exporter. It has to be very transparent and also competitive. And we had to adhere to all the strict guidelines and the standards. But in the case of when you're talking about societal, we should think about the private sector, the public sector. So there, I don't think any of those manufacturing organizations adhere to this type of standards and the value of the production and the costing. So we have to make sure that they also work for a standard minute value, and also each and every person should be given a target. So because we are working on a targeted price, and each person has to achieve a target, and similar process should be adhered to the public sector to get out of these difficult times. And of course, I believe that the public, in the public sector, these organizations who are running unprofitably should be privatized, or even they should be given to foreign direct investors if the local investors are not there, only in the case of local. Because the financial crisis is due to not only to, this is also an added thing for our financial crisis, because we are wasting millions and billions of dollars and rupees because of this the unprofitable the government organizations that are available now. So like the private sector, because we are very, very stringent in our costing, in our operations, where each and every person is answerable. So this is how an organization should run, and that is how you can sustain in a business. And also certain buyers, the brand name buyers, they look for lean management and sustainability. The raw materials they expect, where they a premium price and for what we are doing, and also they accept the products with sustainability, and they like, you know, in product in manufacturing as well as in agriculture, you know, they give a premium price for the sustainability. So therefore I think the public sector should also adhere to this type of standards to become profitable, or if not, they should be given to the private sector.
Thank you, Ms. Ramya. You are very bold to say some of the organizations, some of the public sector organizations to be privatized. Dr. Jagat, do you have a different view on this?
Well, I agree with Ms. Ramya. To add to what she said, I think the public sector organizations, the government-owned organizations, also should be a must that they also do a full comprehensive cost study. Their costs also should be detailed, like in a private sector company. And of course, the entire cost cannot be passed on to the consumer, and the social costing also comes in. So because of that, there will be, in order to absorb all costs, there should be some sort of subsidy given by the government. If you take, so for example, Ceylon Electricity Board, say if the unit price cost is 30 rupees, and if they can charge only 20 rupees per unit from the consumer, there will be 10 rupees subsidy, which the government should give. But this subsidy should be progressively reduced to zero over a period of time. For example, the government can say in 3 years' time, the subsidy of 10 rupees will come down to 5. And in 5 years' time, it will be 0. So what the CB should do is again a target costing procedure. They know that the subsidy will come out. So they are their cost of 30 rupees, they will have to bring it down to 25. So there's a target costing and a time period given. So I think CB should work on that. And I'm sure there are areas in CB where the costs can be reduced, especially in the transmission side and also in the distribution side. So generation probably it's not, because now we are depending too much on oil costs, which can be sort of something that cannot be controlled by the CB engineers. But transmission costs and the distribution costs are definitely, there is room for reduction. So if they have target costing where they had reduced the cost per unit by 5 rupees in the course of 10 years or in the course of 5 years, whatever the period, then they'll work on it and they can come with strategies. And the government also will know that the subsidy that they are giving will be reduced over the years. Then another thing that we are always forgetting is that the government is borrowing mostly from ISBs. We have so much of ISBs, which we now find it difficult to repay. So these ISBs are at a cost. But when it is put to this government-owned corporation for their running of the organizations, there is no such cost coming into the costing of the products or services that they produce. So there is the opportunity cost is also there, plus also the actual cost of the ISPs, which is also completely ignored. So when we are taking loans, we need to look at how we are going to repay them, at least to how we are going to pay the interest back. So the interest to pay back, there should be some sort of recovery from somewhere. So it has to be recovered from either consumer prices or from taxes. So that also should be taken into consideration. Every time the government borrows from ISPs, they should have a plan how they are going to recover that money, and or at least how they are going to find the money to pay the interest. I think those are things that we as a nation should look into in future.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Sagar. Ms. Jeevani?
Yes, I agree with both Mr. Jagat and Ms. Ramya. So I think, it's extremely important. I think we have these standards and institutions that are providing services to the public are transparent in their costing. Just to add to that, I think Professor Vattavala touched on it in his opening remarks. Digitalization and having proper systems in these institutions should be a key, because even in order to capture costs And you asked the question whether this should be going hand in hand with IFRS, reconciling to actual numbers. Digitalization and, introducing proper systems is a key. That's the first point. The second point is whether we can also introduce some sort of benchmarking. So we know there are databases which have information on how other organizations of a similar nature are managing, their financials, their profitability, and so on. So that you also introduce some sort of benchmarking even with the foreign entities who are providing similar services. So that will be a good indicator of whether these institutions are running efficiently or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Jayali. Thank you very much. Vasanta and Asanka, very quickly.
Okay, let me give my, I think, rather than trying to control the price, I think we should allow, or we should encourage the regulators to do more monitoring, because there are mechanisms to monitor. So I think we need to strengthen, maybe our framework, can also talk about this, how to monitor the cost. That is number one. I completely agree with Professor Vatawala and even Jeevani and other panelists also said digitalization is must, especially integrating the institutions. That will be really, really important, especially from the custom, to the other institutions, because then you will get, transparency and, accuracy of the information, right? Right now, if you ask the cost of fuel, I don't think nobody can, tell you but if you can get the real information, embed into the system and integrate it, then that will definitely help. So monitoring rather than controlling, and then, digitalization, and all about whatever the framework, what we are going to bring here, especially on the national interest, the commodities with national interest, definitely, when we improve the costing reporting, the reporting side, which will actually later on will help to improve the governance issue also, because right now we have the governance issue also with these most of these institutions. So whenever the public is going to get the accurate information, when the cost is broken down into the real cost and the actual cost, the difference on the inefficiency, people will voice out effectively and efficiently, to the right direction. Because right now, if you look at, we need a, as accountants, I think that's one of the key responsibility of ours, to tell the, even the general public, where to really, voice that out. So this definitely will help the people to understand the real cost of inefficiency. Thank you.
Thank you, Vasanta. Asanka? Asanka, you're muted. We can't hear you.
Ruchira, I also agree with that all panelists that the cost monitoring and technology to be embedded with that all these processes for all institutions in national wide, that will be support for the understand the correct cost and all. Additionally, Ruchira, that I will suggest, that the kind of initiation for lean thinking for a national wide, right? So lean is all about eliminating waste. So these are the areas that companies now like that the private sector now emerging with that industry to move forward with more additional cost savings and the efficiency improvement, productivity improvement. But in national wide, right, I don't see any initiation like that to public sector to go with the lean journeys, and even at least the 5S concepts and all that will be help us to improve the efficiency. At the same time, that the responsibility count is something for the public sector and all, right? So how to link the KPIs and budgetary controls correctly with the decision-making process and performances management should be very vital in the current scenario, because we see that most of the areas, failures and inefficiencies, and all these linked because of that the no proper responsibilities and KPIs linked with the actions points. So those are the areas in the manager costing account, and when I go through the framework, very vital concept, those should be applicable and educated the people to apply how to apply those concepts in the public sector also, will be helpful for us to, I mean, get rid of this burden from the current crisis and all in long-term journey.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Asankar.
Okay.
With this, I would like to bring the panel discussion to the end. Professor Vatawala, Mr. Raman, do you have any last words to add?
Yeah, Mr. Raman, why don't you go first here?
No, I don't have any particular observation, but perhaps the managerial costing framework, what all we have advocated in the framework in terms of the tools like target costing or marginal costing, they also now need spread out, because I find that, they should resonate in the panel members whom I am also listening to for the first time today. The content in the managerial costing part should reach out to them. Like, for example, the government segment chief whom I was listening to today, how is the target costing framework in that helps her in aligning value with the customer value, with the customer price, and also get a profitability. It's a fantastic tool which is going to be a real asset in the hands of the private sector, which is not governed by the societal costing. So the rich content in the managerial costing, I think, also should be advocated to them along with the societal costing meant for public enterprises. This is where I think the advocacy from our institute should be also on the higher side.
Thank you, Mr. Raman.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think I must thank Mr. Ruchira for conducting very, very effective and good panel discussion. I know that a lot of them were speaking of the efficiency and productivity. Now that is very essential in the private sector. If not for that, I don't think that they will be able to carry on their business. But still we find that as Mr. Raman mentioned, we need to go more into the managerial accounting area. This has really not been understood by many of the private sector organizations, and even on surveys that have been carried out, we find that they are still not very, very conversant in this area. But I think from the discussions that we had, this is a good area that we can promote it among the organizations, because although we were talking of the big organizations, we have the small and medium enterprises. Now that is something that we did not speak of, but that's a very, very important area. Even the costing records. Now they were talking of the bakery, the making of bread and others, but I don't know how many of them are having costing records. So this has to be made compulsory. Even our Companies Act does not lay down that there should be cost records maintained. Now without that, it will be very difficult for us to see the cost, because today the cost price is very, very important. How much of what is the real cost of a product? A lot of the big companies are maintaining that, especially in the industrial area, but SMEs are they do not. One of the problems that the banks are having. So we need to have the legislation to come through, because without legislation, we will not be able to do anything. So that Companies Act and also maybe from the business side, it has to come, and where banks can also ensure that these cost records are maintained, it will help them in the recovery of the loans and to see how they are going on. Then on the public sector, certainly the most important thing, of course, is accountability. Today, no one is accountable. Who is responsible? Is the board of directors responsible, or the managing directors, or the secretary of the ministry, or the minister himself? That is not there. Then the governance, good governance is not there. Transparency. Now, these are all problems that are there. So how much we try to do, it will not be able to solve it. Now, in 2014, I know that the Committee of Public Enterprises, they said that all the corporations are running at big losses. They are not maintaining proper cost records, and they recommended that all these state corporations should have cost accountants and also proper cost records to be maintained. And they said that the Treasury should go and ensure that these are maintained, but it is only in the records. Now, you see the similar thing in all the Committee of Public Enterprises, where they are able to find all these things, but there is no one taking any action. So if you want to put the state corporations in a sound footing, then the action has to be taken. And ultimately, if that is not done, the society has to pay for it. Inefficiency they have to pay, wastage they have to pay, corruption they have to pay. All these are added on to the cost. So ultimately the society has to pay, and today these things have come out. That's why the people are now saying that we have to have some system change in order that all these things can be taken forward. So I think definitely this webinar that we have today have brought a lot of good things. So I think we need to see how this could be done. Reduction of expenditure. No one is worried of that now, because the budgets are there. The 70% of the budget is also going to all the government side, but ultimately the private sector and the society has to pay for it. So we need to see how they create value, how their efficiency is improved, their services are improved, and all those things will have to be done. So once again, let me thank all our the speakers, Mr. Mahendra Jayasekara and Mr. Raman. I think Mr. Hennaka Bandara had a problem with the power. There had been no power, that he had to, he was unable to connect, although he was there at the beginning. And all our panelists, I think they are all from the private sector, and many from the export sector. Today, I think it's an exceptional situation that we are in. We have never been in this sort of situation. They should give all the incentives to the export sector in order that they can bring in the exchange. Similarly, now what was mentioned, like the cement industry, now those are very, very essential industries, and the prices are just skyrocketing. Every day, as you say, the prices are going up. So how we are going to control this? The exchange rate is going up, the inflation is going up, the prices are going up. So how we are going to control this is, I don't know how we can do it. But what I feel is the stability has to come. First of all, the political stability has to come. Then we need to get the foreign exchange. It is not only the IMF, but all other countries. The World Bank has to come in, the ADB has to come in. All our countries will have to come and then give and help in this. That's how a sick country can go. Then there is also something good that has happened, that as a result, we will be going down, and we will be able to get back some of the lost incentives that were there. Now, if we lost the GSP status with US, and it went to America. So especially the government sector, Mrs. Ramya Virakon is saying, you may be able to see how we can make use of those in order that we can get more industries coming in, building up more exports. So we need to go into that. And as I think Dr. Jagat Piris mentioned, ISBs were really something that ruined this country. Because when the ADB and World Bank loans were coming, they did a full project report and everything was done and monitored properly. But when the ISBs came, no one knew where it went. That's why I say there is no accountability. All these people who were at the top, who took these loans, must answer. Otherwise, we will not know what has happened to it. Now we have to pay all these loans. So if they took ISBs, then they should be able to see that they have been invested in projects which will give us a return, and we can repay these things. So a lot of these things are all, there is no accountability is one of the most important areas. And these are basic things that we learn in accounting, honesty, integrity, accountability, transparency, good governance. Now the Securities and Exchange Commission has laid down so many rules for the quoted companies, but then what are we having in the state sector? There is nothing. So we need to see how we can make a radical change if we want to get our economy on the right footing. No point getting maybe fuel from one country and others, and we will never be able to stop it, because again, we'll be consuming it. But if we are unable to produce and to repay these loans, we will never be able to come out. So we need to have a complete change in the whole thing. Maybe we need to all work 24 hours if we are going to do this. I know the private sector is doing it, but similarly, everyone will have to do that, cut down everywhere where the foreign exchange is being utilized, and then only put the country on the. So let me thank you. I think this has given us a lot of thoughts. The Cost and Management Accounting Standard Board has to take a really maybe a forceful way how they can go ahead and then tell the government that these are the things that have to be done if this country is to be put on correct footing. So once again, let me thank everyone and wish you all the very best, and all our listeners who are there. I know that through tremendous problems of power cuts and others, we've still been able to be there. So once again, let me thank everyone and wish you all the very best, and success to everyone, and that you'll be able to meet these challenges and be able to carry on the business to rebuild this country. We have to rebuild. We have to re-engineer. Now, these are terms that are all known to you all. Unless that is done, and public-private partnership is the only way that we can do it. All these state institutions, we bring in public-private partnership, we bring in the private sector management, make them more efficient, cut down all these costs and run it, and tell the government how we can really make this really a paradise that we are looking at. Thank you, and all the very best.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ivani. Thank you very much. So I hope all of you all will be with us in this whole thing, and that you all will support us in taking these cost and management accounting standards forward.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, Asanta, Ms. Ramya,
Bye.
Dr. Jacob. Bye.
Thank you, Richard.
Take care.
Thanks. Okay.